Hey, lead learners, welcome to the Learning Lab, the podcast dedicated to empowering educational leaders like you to lead with capacity, competency, and confidence. I'm Dr. Lisa Weir, aka Lead Learner Lisa, and I am your host. And in each episode, we'll explore the latest trends, insights, and strategies to help you navigate the ever evolving landscape of education. Whether you're a seasoned administrator, an aspiring principal, or a teacher leader, this podcast is your go-to resource for inspiration and practical advice. We believe that strong leadership is the cornerstone of successful schools and thriving students, and we are here to support you on your journey. Join us as we dive into conversations with visionary educators, share real-world success stories, and provide actionable tips to enhance your leadership skills. Together, we'll build a community of lead learners committed to making a lasting impact in education, changing lives, and making futures one mind at a time. So let's get started and lead the way to a brighter future for our students and our schools. All right. Hey, lead learners, I'm Dr. Lisa, and I'm excited to have Miss Sonya James of Robinson James Consulting for Education join me in the Learning Lab today. Sonya joins me as a fellow educator with over 20 years of experience in building and district level leadership. Sonya also has a lot of experience with principal leader and leader mentorship and coaching. And more importantly, I'm really excited to share that I have been blessed to know Sonya. Well, thinking about it, it's been a long time. When I first was reflecting on this, I was like, I don't know if I want to say how many decades, but let's just say a few decades or more. Sonia and I shared some of our early years of our educational journey together. We went to high school together and we went to undergrad together. So, Sonia, welcome and thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me. And I'm excited to talk with you today about our journey.
Awesome. I'm excited to have you here and talk about your perspective on education and leadership today. But I also want to share with everyone a little bit about how our educational journey, which we shared starting in high school as learners, really shaped how we are as educators. You know, sometimes we look back on our experience when we were students and people that have shaped our journey. We're also, during this Learning Lab session, going to talk a little bit about some coaching tips for current leaders, touch a little bit on the current state of education today and our hopes for the future. So let's put on our lab coats and step into the lab and begin. So, Sonia, let's talk a little bit about our educational journey starting at high school. We had some really good times. We had some tough times. I know during our senior years, we lost a classmate. But when we think about and look at the impact that our journey has had on us, our learning journey, what are a few things that you remember that really connects you to who you have become as a leader?
What I think mostly about for us for high school is the community feel that we had within our school, the collaboration among students and among staff, the fact that we went to a small high school, and that everyone pretty much knew everyone, which helped to build that community, which helped build me as a learner or helped me become a learner by working with classmates and working with teachers. And then because our school was so small, we were able to make connections with our teachers, and which made it easier for me to go to. As I went to college, I wasn't afraid to approach, professors and things like that to get extra help because we had that connection in high school, which allowed me to continue that process.
Yeah, I know. I think about that, and there was the benefits of that small learning environment because culture and climate is so important,
Mm-hmm.
and creating that relationship and that rapport, and where people kind of know you by your name, right?
Mm-hmm.
We would walk down the hall
Right.
and people, our teachers knew who we were, our friends knew who we were, and that whole community feel is really important. What kind of things have you done in your leadership journey to really focus on culture and climate at your schools and to create that community family feel? What if you had some tips for leaders on doing that? What are some of the thoughts or things you would share?
Well, first and foremost, you kind of hit on that when you said like everyone knew our name, you know. So one of the things that's important to me is that I know every student's name in my building. And as the students enter to build my relationship with my students, I get into every classroom and I talk with every student. I have them introduce themselves to me as I introduce myself to them. And as we go about the year, I say to them, before you speak to me, like the first 2 weeks of school, make sure you tell me your name so that I don't forget. So that's the one thing. And then I also say to my teachers, greet every student by name as they enter your room. So when they're coming into your classroom, as they walk through the door, you're saying, good morning, Lisa, you know, like, how are you? And so making sure that they're making that personal connection with students. In addition to, we have several different things that we do culturally, like in our building, that we recognize all of the different cultures that I have within my building. I have a melting pot of students from all different races. So it's important to me that students feel welcome, that students feel like they belong, and that they feel like they're included. And that might not only looking as making sure that we know their name and that we pronounce their names correctly, but also creating that community feel like in your classroom. I have a community circle with my teachers during staff meeting, and I expect them to have that same community meeting with their students at least twice a week. And within that community, when they're meeting with their students, they're talking about, you know, not only, you know, how their week was or how their weekend was, or are they experiencing like any problems in school or at home. So that's, you know, one of the things that we do to work on that community.
Yeah, it sounds like, being very visible as a,
Mm-hmm.
and then a lot of times, as a leader, when you're a teacher, you might have, depending on if you're a high school teacher or elementary teacher, anywhere from 25 to 90 students or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really important to remember that each one of those students are individual and they have
Mm-hmm.
their own experience, right?
Right. Absolutely.
And the thing about the name is really interesting. I oftentimes will ask someone or a student to help me pronounce their name
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of times we'll hear people say, "Well, can I just call you, Miss L?" But
Mm-hmm.
there's a story behind,
Right.
story behind where my name came from. There's
Mm-hmm.
behind, why they were given that name. And sometimes, that name is really important to them. And someone taking the time to learn how to pronounce it
Right.
adds value, and they feel important, right?
Mm-hmm.
The building leader is taking that time. When you think about your educational journey, was there a teacher or educator that or a leader that stuck out that
Mm-hmm.
impacted your journey? And that could be good or bad, right? We sometimes have experiences, and those bad experiences can impact our journey just as much as the good experiences. But does anybody
Mm-hmm.
for you stick out or come to mind?
So I have two teachers that stick out for me that was a positive, and I do have one teacher that sticks out for me as a negative. But my two positive teachers, I but what I'm saying too now is three I even thinking about. So I had Miss Lehman, who was my first grade teacher, and she looped with me. She had me for first and second. And that was when I went to public school, and I remember her taking us to her house so that we can swim in her pool. And it was just such a great experience. And then Miss Jackson. Miss Jackson is the one that taught me my multiplication facts and made sure that I knew them and made sure that I was a good student in math. And then the last person was Miss Davis, and she was my fifth grade teacher. And Miss Davis had this big afro, and she was the only Black teacher at my school. And I went to St. Cecilia, and she was the only Black teacher there, and we were all excited to have her. But my negative experience was a teacher, and I won't call his name, but he told me that I could never become a teacher because I stuttered. And so throughout school, I just couldn't get a word out, and I stuttered really, really bad. It's something that runs in our family, right? But I was able to take speech and I was able to overcome that. But keeping in mind that when I first went to Michigan State, I didn't major in education because that stuck with me, that was something that I couldn't do. But I always believe what God has for you, he has for you. And whatever your journey is, whether you try to, take a different road, he always brings it back to you, right? And so I think of not, like not majoring in education, but then getting back in education, and look how far I've gone, which shows that this is what I was supposed to do, right? And so those are the teachers that stand out for me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. God will find a way to get us back on our journey to our purpose. I didn't major in education, had no idea, I was going to be
Mhm.
a pediatrician, different kind of doctor.
Yeah.
But you're right. God really has a way to guide us on our journey,
Hmm.
and there's a purpose for us, right?
Right.
The
For sure.
impact, your purpose really helps you to impact others, and you've had such
Hmm.
a major impact, just like some of the teachers that you were describing here. I was thinking as I was listening to the story you were saying about the teacher taking you and letting you swim in her pool. And, maybe that doesn't happen as often anymore in the world that we live
Hmm.
in. But what that did allow is you got to see another side of that teacher. She's a human
Right.
being. She has a house. I
Hmm.
always remember going to the grocery store, going somewhere, and then I see a teacher and I see them outside of the classroom.
Right.
Like, and they're like, yeah, we go grocery shopping, we eat. And sometimes when we can let people see as educators that human side of us, whether it's
Hmm.
we're sharing that side of us with our
Right.
staff or with
Yeah.
our students. And so I think that was really special. And then someone taking time to invest in you to make sure
Hmm.
that you learn your math facts, right?
Hmm.
Make sure that you're growing and you're achieving. A school is a learning organization. So
Right.
your babies to make sure that
Hmm.
you also share something too that oftentimes Sonya and I have talked a lot socially when we get together. And the more and more after all these decades of knowing each other, I realized that we have so many different things in common. And
Hmm.
you talked about speech. And so I think it was literally the year before special education it became this legal IDEA thing.
Hmm.
And I had a lisp, right? And so
Hmm.
my son and others talk about this dream, and I have this podcast. And my granddaughter came up with a name for my Monday successful tips. And
Hmm.
I almost didn't go with that name because I have a lisp, and S's are hard for me to say. But again, I think that, we're role models for anything you put
Hmm.
your mind to and your purpose and supporting those students that might have those encounters of doubt.
Hmm.
It's really important for us to embrace those kiddos that maybe someone else has told them they couldn't be something or do something because of whatever it is that's going on with them, because we don't want our kids to miss their purpose. I always talk about
Right.
saving lives and making futures.
Hmm.
So, and then that goes to this point, question I was going to ask you about is leaders, we're impacting lives every day, but we don't instantly see the impact that we have. But my dad taught me that education is the foundation of everything.
Right.
As a leader, of a school or a district or a department, whatever seat you're leading from, your influence and impact is really important in making sure that those outcomes occur, right? To make sure
Hmm.
that when those kiddos come to school, that they're learning and they're growing. What advice do you have for leaders relative to their impact, not only like on their staff that they lead, but also the students and the
Hmm.
reason that we're here, that importance of impact, and what advice would you give a new leader, a leader looking to improve their impact and influence?
Right. Well, one of the things for me, as as an example. I never ask teachers to do anything that I wouldn't do. And I also tell my teachers that I'm there to make their job easier. Just because I'm the principal, it doesn't mean that that I get to sit back. But my job is to create a safe, orderly environment so that is conducive for learning for all. And so, whatever I can do to make sure that the environment is one that students can learn and that teachers can teach. For me, that's the most important thing. And then to make sure that I have that positive impact on the teachers and on the students. And as a new leader, when you go into a school or you go into a district, my advice is don't change anything. Like that is your year to look and observe. And then as you go through, as you go through the year, you're taking that mental note, and then you're creating a coalition of people that you are getting to know, and a coalition of people that you're going to be able to work with, and that they're going to help you build the school, or to like meet the goals that you all might set as a staff or as a district. And if you do that, as you begin to make the changes the following year and thereafter, and you have that coalition of people to help you do that, it becomes a collaboration of learning and of changing, and of you guys like building this community together. So I would say to new leaders, when you go into a building or you go into a district, that is your time to look and observe and to not make any changes, but to sustain what has been going on, so that you will know what you need to do the following year, so that make those changes within the district, or, within your building.
Great advice. Yeah, that time to build rapport, relationships.
Relationships are really important.
Yeah,
Relationships.
that year, you can use that year and that time to really solidify all of those kind of things. And I love what you were saying about your role. You really spoke to servant leadership, right? That you're there to build the capacity and to make sure that the teachers can teach and the students can learn. And, it took me a while. It was a couple of years into my leadership that I learned that my who was my teachers. And if I took care of my teachers would take care of the students. So great advice. Did
Yeah.
you find, and you have a unique situation. I was a building leader prior to COVID, and as an educator, I did go through the shift and everything that we went through with COVID, and then our education has taken a lot of shifts in general over the last several years from COVID to the political landscape. We know that educators are getting out of the field, sadly. And so, did you find that your leadership during COVID shifted during that time, or do you feel like your leadership journey kind of prepared you better as an experienced leader going
hmm
through COVID? What was that like? And now on the other side of that, looking back.
hmm I think it changed sort of. I think, we had to learn how to adapt. I've had the pleasure of working in a urban district where the resources were like, very little. So, things were hard. It was hard to be an administrator and to get to get what you needed, for your teachers and your students, sometimes to go into a suburban district where it was plentiful, right? Which is like where I am now. And I think those challenges and being able to experience both of those helped me to be the principal that I am, which saying after COVID, things were limited. We had to work with what, we had, which was not a whole lot other than technology. And then trying to make sure that we got to kids' homes to see, to make sure that they had what they need. So the students, our students that were most at risk were the ones that needed to be in school. And so that kind of took me back to what do I need to do, even though it's COVID and the kids are in school, how can we make sure that those kids that need the most help are getting to school or getting the resources that they need. So it kind of took me back to that moment of really, really trying to get to the most needy and what that might look like. So it didn't change me, but it took me back to, wow, these kids are really at risk and at need, and how might we, be able to support those kids?
Yeah, you were able to use other parts of your journey, and I think
Mm-hmm.
there's an exercise I do with leaders that I'm coaching or classes that I teach, and it's kind of a river journey and reflection on what their journey has been up through the point of where they are now in their leadership,
Mm-hmm.
and who are the people and events that have impacted them.
Right.
It's really important that we reflect, even on a daily basis, but just reflecting in general, and then sometimes using a past experience or what you've learned in the
Mm-hmm.
past really apply to, like you gave the example of a current situation when you were dealing with COVID. You had experience in the past with limitations. And so
Mm-hmm.
it really helped prepare you. So never to really, to always continue, I guess here, the takeaway for leaders is, always continue to put tools in your toolbox and
Mm-hmm.
those tools. And just remember to go back and look in that toolbox when
Right.
the unexpected comes up to help you through that. So I love that. Teacher retention is something that many
Oh, yeah.
leaders are
Mm-hmm.
dealing with. And what's your secret formula to retaining or recruiting teachers?
Well, you're right about retention. My staff they're seasoned, but they're at an age. I have a couple of teachers that can retire, but the majority of my teachers are between 15 and 20 years. So they are having kids, or their kids are, they're like soccer moms and they are raising their kids. So the staff that I have now, they've been there for a while. The staff that I have is probably the best staff that I've ever worked with, right? And I always say that like they're my happy place. So I enjoy working with them. But just trying to give teachers the support that they need to retain, to stay. I do have a couple new teachers, and just making sure that, sometimes when we get new teachers, we give them the worst kids, right? That's, sometimes happen. They have like the most behavior problems, and so that's one of the things that I don't do. I try to make their time, those first couple years manageable so that they are not, trying to quit or they want to leave because it's so hard. So to retain teachers, one of the things I try to do is to mentor them, make sure they have a mentor, and to give them not only the resources that they need, but that mental support that they need to get through those first 5 years.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that. I even think about like when COVID first happened, and right after that, I think there was a lot of funding that went for student social, emotional,
Mm-hmm.
mental health. And I was like, whoa, well, wait a minute, because we can pour that into that bucket, but the people who are in the classroom with them day to day
Right.
need to support them, right?
We
We
need to support them for sure.
Absolutely. And so I was really happy when we started to look at seeing more funding streams and more
Mm-hmm.
attention to, how do we take care of the mental health and well-being of our staff? And, we all hear the buzzword self-care, but it's really important to have self-care. But as a leader, I think thinking self-care for yourself and
Mm-hmm.
self-care for your staff, but also there's the care of others, right? And
Right.
how are you caring for your staff? How are you
Mm-hmm.
personally, maybe making sure you put in your budget a plan, a well-being plan.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we talk about morale, but sometimes it's more individual than that. And
Yeah.
this week, the word I had for successful was intentional, and it's like you
Mm-hmm.
have to really be intentional about
Mm-hmm.
priorities and the
Right.
well-being of your staff. I think being intentional about the well-being of your staff will really help retain staff, but also help staff performance, right? If they're
Mm-hmm.
feeling well and they're
Yep.
feeling valued and they're taking care of themselves, they'll be able to perform better. You also talked about support. So, being mindful, you have new teachers.
Mm-hmm.
How are you supporting them? That
Right.
onboarding is more than just, coming
Mm-hmm.
in, filling paperwork 30, 60, 90 days.
Right.
Onboarding goes on for a little while until they
Mm-hmm.
confident and cared for and they feel like they're a part of your community.
Right.
So I love, love, love that. Both you and I have a strong belief in leader coaching and
Mm-hmm.
mentorship. And even I heard you speak just a little bit about educator, teacher coaching, and mentorship in general. Can you just talk a little bit to our lead learners in the lab about why mentoring and coaching, and from your perspective, is so important?
Well, I think being an administrator and a teacher can be a lonely job, right? Especially as an administrator, whether you are elementary principal, middle or high school, sometimes it that is like everything comes to you, right? And so it's important to give those teachers and the admin the tools that they need in order to work with students and parents. And I often say that we're our our market is like human beings. We're working with little humans, right? And we're shaping them for the world. So it's important. You can't just teach. It's important to coach, to have that instructional coaching and that mental health coaching to make sure that they're able to support students holistically. Right. It used to be a time when teachers would just go and they just provided instruction, but now we're teaching kids social and emotionally, right, along with academically. So it's important to give them, to coach teachers through that, or to coach leaders through that, and to help principals to be well rounded. So I think that principals, like when I'm coaching principals, I'm not just coaching them to be managers, but I'm coaching them to be instructional leaders, right? And you have to be able to balance both. Sometimes you have principals or admin that they're just managers, right? But if you are in the school, you have to be a manager and an instructional leader and be able to know when to bring out either or. And so that's why I think it's important to coach administrators, to help them understand their role as a leader, as that servant, and when to push and when to pull back. Right. And then for teachers, it's important for me to make sure that a teacher is just not standing up in the front of the classroom, that they're more of a facilitator within the classroom, that their proximity is important, and that they're building relationships with kids and with families. And so they kind of help, that's one of the things that I focus on is classroom management, of course, right? And then that other piece of relationships. And if you have that, like, you can have the content, but if you can't manage your class and you don't have those relationships with kids, you may not, you can be the smartest person, but still the students may not retain that information from you. And because I strongly believe that kids have to want to learn from you in order to retain that information.
Yeah, I love that. I love you lifted up a couple of favorite topics I have, and we'll have to have you back on here to talk about is, really prioritizing instructional leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And there's the operational side too, and great leaders lead. They don't.
Mm-hmm.
And then I love that you lifted up the support that you give in the classroom and helping teachers to understand the importance of relationships, but also understand that we're not teaching content, we're teaching
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep. Mm-hmm.
you look at it through that. So
Right.
I love that. Well, Sonia, thank you. I really
Thank you.
amazing.
I'm excited that I was able to get on and we had some good conversation.
Yeah, thank you. I remember running into you. I think it was at a DeFore training many years ago, and I think
Mm-hmm.
I realized that we had both crossed paths in.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you joining us in the Learning Lab. I hope that you'll come back soon and
Well,
share.
I appreciate you asking me and having me on. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. You've shared so many of your experiences and wisdom with our lead learners, and I'm sure they have a lot of things that they've taken away. Lead learners, it's time to hang up our lab coats until next time. Meanwhile, you can follow me on Instagram at One Mind Ed Consulting LLC. Please like and share. Check out Successful Tips. See, I can say that a little bit better, even with my list. Check out the successful tips on Mondays. And until next time, lead learners, let's lead, learn, and love, saving lives, making futures, one mind at a time.